news, well, that didn't last long. About 29 hours to be precise. Chris Bowen's bid to become Labor leader began yesterday morning when he took the media out to the fibro home he grew up in Western Sydney, showing off his humble beginnings, declaring he was the man to lead the ALP comeback after the weekend election result. This morning he then did a round of TV and radio interviews and was sounding confident.
I'm getting good support from colleagues. You know, I've been speaking to colleagues over the last 24 hours. I've had good conversations. I've got good support from colleagues. It's fair to say the majority of colleagues I've spoken to have said that they'd vote for me. Some have told me they won't. Plenty have told me they will. That's just part of the process. And it's a good process going forward.
A majority of those he spoke to may have told him they'd back him, but it's unclear how many he therefore spoke to, because it became pretty clear as the day wore on where the numbers were going. One by one, Labor's senior and junior figures from the left and the right factions began declaring their support for Anthony Albanese. Take a look at the list. The Labor's Senate leader, Penny Wong, Christina Keneally, the New South Wales right faction senator, Tony Burke, also from the right, a string from the left, of course, but really, as I say, coming from different states, from different factions, all today publicly declaring they're supporting Anthony Albanese. Hour by hour, the list only grew and the momentum as well.
I'm also here today to announce that I will be supporting Anthony Albanese for the Labor leadership. And I do so simply because I think he's the best person for the job. Albo is the outstanding parliamentarian of our generation. He's shown that in his previous capacity as leader in the House, and he's shown that he can work with people across the parliament to achieve the outcomes that benefit working people. I think he's the best person to lead us, and he is the best person to take up the fight to Scott Morrison and the coalition. He's also the best person to unify our party, which is so important after this loss. Anthony Albanese knows who he is, and he knows what he stands for. He's a man of authenticity and integrity. He's got a capacity to speak to people across this great country, to speak to people in the regions and in the outer suburbs, as well as in our cities.
I just think that Anthony Albanese is able to retail politics into the pub in Emerald, into the boardroom in the middle of Brisbane. He's got that knack of being able to talk to everyday Australians. I just think that's what we need. Someone who's prepared to listen to the coal miners in Blackwater, but also understand the regions, the bush and the city, and he does. He's been the infrastructure minister, delivering for cities, but also delivering roads for regional Queensland. Probably spent more time in regional Queensland than anyone else in the caucus.
You got the message. These public endorsements throughout the day gave Anthony Albanese the momentum, made it clear to everyone where the party was going. Chris Bowen's problems were, well, obvious from watching his opening pitch yesterday. He acknowledged that he was the architect of the franking credit and negative gearing policies, already being blamed in part for Labor's loss. He also acknowledged he stuffed up with his comments suggesting that those who didn't like these policies could go and vote for someone else. And then there, of course, was the baggage of being urged into this race to run for leader by Bill Shorten, who's now the interim leader and supposed to be staying out of this contest. That really upset some Labor MPs, including the usually diplomatic Penny Wong.
I'd be surprised if that were happening. It wouldn't be consistent with the role that a former leader has, a current interim leader, and it would undermine the unity that Bill has been such an important part in rebuilding.
And so, just in the last half hour, as we saw there, Chris Bowen declared that he's not going to pursue this leadership bid any further, not even for another day.
It's clear to me that I would have majority support in the actual caucus ballot. Not a big majority, but majority support, with some support from the left faction, as well as, of course, support from the right faction and people who aren't in any faction. But it's also clear to me, and I'm a realist, that Albo would win the rank and file for good reason. He's a popular character, by a good margin. Hence, I've reached the view that it would be unlikely for me to win the ballot.
Now, this suggestion from Chris Bowen as he leaves the leadership race that he would have won the caucus, he would have won a narrow majority of his colleagues in the parliamentary caucus team, well, that's contested by some of the senior figures supporting Anthony Albanese. He described, in fact, to me just the last 10 or 15 minutes, as 100% bull dust. A bit of selective editing there. The point being that Anthony Albanese clearly, in their view, has a majority of the caucus, and once that happened today and was clear to everyone, more and more started to pile in behind Anthony Albanese. Either way, another interesting comment from Chris Bowen as he leaves the leadership race but clearly wants to leave a stake in the ground as the senior right faction figure in the Labor Party. Yes, he touched on some of the issues he touched on yesterday and this morning, but another one, an important one. He wants the party to do something to reach out to people of faith.
I also wanted to ensure through the leadership process that the party urgently deals with the matter of people of faith in our community not feeling that the Labor Party talks to them. I've noticed as I've been around during the election campaign and even in the days since, as people have stopped me in the street to wish me the best in the leadership ballot or just stop to talk about what happened in the election, how often it has been raised with me that people of faith no longer feel that progressive politics cares about them. These are people with a social conscience who want to be included in the progressive movement. We need to tackle this urgently.
Well, perhaps not surprising, Chris Bowen would say that. He comes from the Western Sydney seat of McMahon, and it's in seats like that saw some of the highest no votes when it came to the same-sex marriage postal survey. He, of course, didn't speak up when Bill Shorten, in the final weeks of the campaign, was demanding Scott Morrison clear up his religious views on whether gay people go to hell and so on. Either way, what happens now as far as the Labor leadership is concerned? Well, Anthony Albanese is undisputably the favourite, and now more likely to become leader after Chris Bowen's withdrawal from the race. And he is due to address the media in just under an hour from now at 5 o'clock Eastern Time in his electorate. But there is still a chance someone else runs against him, and all eyes are on Queensland young gun Jim Chalmers. Despite some reports to the contrary, he has not done a deal with Anthony Albanese to become deputy leader. He is still being urged to run for the top job by some and is still weighing up whether to do so. This afternoon tweeting, "I feel for Chris Bowen, that is, and I know it would have been hard for him to pull out. I'm being encouraged to nominate for leader, and I'll now consider my options overnight. Australian Labor needs to rebuild, refresh and renew, and I want to play a prominent role in that. What role is to be determined." So the key points there are that refresh and renew. What we're talking about when we talk about Dr. Jim Chalmers is generational change. Yes, a bigger risk given his shorter time in Parliament. He hasn't been a minister. He hasn't had a lot of time on the front bench. A much lower national profile, of course, than Anthony Albanese, who's far better known. But someone who is from the right of the party, and importantly, someone who is from Queensland, which would be important assets in winning back those lost votes.